Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm delighted that you're with us today. We on Seek Reality especially enjoy talking with the most accomplished spiritual seekers. I hear from people, and so I know you feel the same way I do, but we love to hear from people who have put a lot of their lives into very deep dives into trying to answer the world's very biggest, deepest, greatest, and most profound spiritual questions. And, it's great when we can follow along, and sometimes we have trouble following along, frankly. I have to strain sometimes to really understand, but I'm game. I really try. Our guest today, who is with us for the first time, is very much in the mold of a spiritual seeker. His name is Douglas Grunther, and his deep spiritual seeking has been sparked with humor, he's informed by his love of philosophy, his study of psychology, and basically spiritual seeking. He's the creator and host of the Woodstock Roundtable, which is billed as a rollicking and multi-award winning radio talk show spiced with the visionaries of our time. And there are a lot of them. Douglas Grunther graduated from Columbia University, and he was a Rhodes Scholarship finalist there, so he beat me for sure. He has been a featured speaker for national audiences, and he's a dreamwork facilitator certified by Dr. Jeremy Taylor, co-founder of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. Douglas tells us that the term synchronicity, I love this, he knows what a synchronicity is, and he can explain it. I love that. We'll talk to him about that more. He says the term synchronicity was created by Carl Jung, who described it as two or more events which clearly didn't cause one another, but are too meaningfully connected to be a mere coincidence. Get that? They're connected, but they didn't cause one another, and they're too meaningfully connected to be a mere coincidence. I love that. His more poetic description of synchronicity is a falling together in time. Our guest says, as we will see, that Jung collaborated with one of the most brilliant quantum physicists in the world, and together they were convinced that synchronicities occur not just at the individual level, but at the deeper and more expansive level of a collective unconscious, one that's shared with all of humanity. And frankly, Douglas says in the preface to his book, which is called The Quantum and the Dream, Visionary Consciousness, AI, and the New Renaissance, he says there that he will show us how this synchronicity generates two parallel, fascinating descents, one into the dark, creative center of the unconscious mind, and the other into the dark, creative center of the subconscious, atomic quantum realm. And so he says, I invite you on a journey. Human intelligence, computer intelligence, and the most influential of the three, nature's intelligence, are creating evolutionary change, and that will be a new renaissance. I invite you on a journey. Human intelligence, computer intelligence, and the most influential of the three, nature's intelligence, are creating evolutionary change, and that will be a new renaissance. Well, this is pretty exciting, I think. Douglas, welcome. It's great to have you with us today, and let's see you live up to that.
Well, Roberta, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to a conversation.
Well, I do too. Let's get to it.
So, the same, I'm first of all love reading through your website, and you're challenging, calling on us to challenge what's called the materialist paradigm. And so, perhaps we should start with what that is. A paradigm is the way that we see the world. And over the last 500 or 600 years, humanity's made tremendous progress in terms of technology and inventions. The invention of antibiotics alone has expanded a human lifespan by almost double in the last 100 years. But at the same time, while we all have benefited from this technology, it's now literally destroying the very environment that keeps us and most major life forms alive. And
Right.
so we need a bigger picture of who we are in this 21st century, in which, and this is what people I think really need to understand, we are changing at a rate faster than ever before in evolution. And that creates a lot of anxiety and confusion and dislocation. And it's up to those who are true seekers to find that place within the human mind that is capable of seeing a new paradigm, which is not based on materialism. It certainly doesn't mean we can't enjoy the fruits of material comforts, but we need to transcend the definition of a good life as being getting more and more stuff, because it's not working and it's literally depleting the very air that we breathe. As apocryphal as the last election was, regardless of what your political viewpoint is, it is just another example of the fact that change is happening at an explosive speed, and it's important that we find ways to collaborate together and transcend this materialist paradigm, which we can get into a little more deeply. I am proposing, and I have a lot of footnotes in my book because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a mathematician. My background, as you pointed out, is in philosophy, depth psychology, and spiritual seeking, and dream work. But what happened in the year 1900 was fascinating, and it hasn't been written a lot about. We could say the first year of the modern age was the year 1900. We came out of the Victorian age and into the modern age. And isn't it interesting that in that first year of the modern age, 1900, two things happened. One at the very beginning of that year, one at the very end of that year, which I am proposing is a huge synchronicity. At the very beginning of the year 1900, Sigmund Freud publishes The Interpretation of Dreams, a book which literally will change culture as much as just about any book published in the 20th century. Freud turns out to be very limited in his understanding of the unconscious, but he opened the door to make us realize that to understand who we are, we need to have a better connection and understanding of how our unconscious mind works. At the very end of that year, 1900, Max Planck, a very rational scientist, was given the task of creating a more efficient light bulb. He did, but in discovering that, he uncovered what looked like a puzzling paradox in science, namely that light at certain levels can be a particle and it can be a wave. And that's rationally impossible. Waves and particles are two very different entities. How could light be both? He was so freaked out by it that he just sort of tried to bury it and was just happy that he was able to come up with a more efficient light bulb. My claim is, and I think I have pretty good evidence, that Freud's publication of the interpretation of dreams and Planck's discovering of the quantum reality was a synchronicity. As you pointed out, a term defined by Carl Jung as two or more events, which clearly didn't cause each other. Freud and Planck didn't know each other, but they're too meaningfully connected to be a coincidence. And I'm saying that the meaning is Freud was inspiring us to dive more deeply into the creative center of the human mind, the unconscious. And Planck didn't realize it, but he was starting the invitation to explore the creative depth of the subatomic world. And it took a very creative, imaginative thinker to really get this going 5 years later. His name was Albert Einstein. And we can get into why he was the first one to discover the quantum nature of light and relativity. But that kind of sets up where the book begins.
You're not very ambitious about this, are you?
It's exciting.
Wow, it certainly is. And yeah, you managed to bring all my favorite heroes into it at once. I think that's pretty exciting too.
Well, we can pick up the story. And so Freud's book took a while to gain momentum, but slowly his book, which is celebrating the unconscious as a huge part of who we are, it started influencing art. It influenced music. It influenced philosophy. It influenced social science. And then in 1905, a little known scientist by the name of Albert Einstein. Why was he little known? Well, Albert Einstein famously wasn't a great student, not because he wasn't brilliant, but because his brilliance didn't fit the materialist paradigm of the educational system, which is still in existence today, which is, here's what we know about reality. I want you to stick to that. But because he couldn't get a job as a professor, because he was too much of a rebel, he took a job in a patent office. And he didn't mind it because it made enough money so he could support his family. And it gave him time to do imaginative thought experiments, which he loved. And one of those experiments, he imagined what it would be like to chase a light beam, because unlike most scientists who were scared stiff of Planck's discovery of the quantum because it was so confusing, Einstein thought it was a fabulous puzzle. And so in his imagination, he chases a light beam. And in his imagined vision, when he catches up to the light beam, time stops. That gave him the first intuition that light might be the fastest element in the universe. He then stated, and I confirm the quote in a footnote, he said, "My entire career, Roberta, is based on a dream I had when I was 11 years old." We weren't taught that, were we? But he said it, and he meant it. And I present his dream in my book. It's a short dream, but basically in his dream at 11 years old, he's sledding down a snow-covered slope, but he's gaining ridiculous amounts of speed. And as he goes faster and faster and faster, the sky lights up in refracted colors. Now, as an 11-year-old, he thought that was really cool, but he never knew quite what it meant. But now that he's thinking about light, and his imagination showed him that light might be the fastest thing in the universe, and that as we gain speed, the whole sky shifts. That dream and his imaginative vision led him to the mathematical certainty that, in fact, time is not objective, but subjective. And quantum theory will go on to prove, not theorize, but prove that at the deepest level of reality, there's no such thing as separation, locality, or past, present, and future. Everything is an integrated web of potential. That's no longer a pure theory, it's a fact. But most scientists, even to this day, most philosophers, even to this day, don't want to deal with the complexity of that. But people who shift to the right hemisphere of their brain, we'll get into that because we all have done it and can do it.
Right.
The right hemisphere of our brain, which is what Einstein used with his creative visualization, and our dreams first come to us through the right hemisphere of our brain. When we shift to the right hemisphere of the brain, we find the ultimate playground of visionary ideas and discoveries. And what I'm proposing, and it's certainly what your podcast is about, and what your listeners feel, is we need more imaginative exploration of that incredible right hemisphere of our brain if we're going to figure out better ways to collaborate with each other in this digital age of the 21st century.
Wow. I just love the way you think. This is great. Okay, this is really great. All right, keep going, kiddo, because I'm with you. And I think a lot of people listening are saying, wow, this is great. Keep going. We know where you're going with this.
Okay, so my book, The Quantum and the Dream, based on this synchronicity of two parallel trips, one into the creative dark center of the human unconscious and one into the dark creative center of the subatomic realm, is divided into three sections. And each one represents a shift in consciousness that I am proposing can lead us to this new renaissance. So I'll briefly go through the three shifts. Excuse me. Shift number one is the shift from the left hemisphere of the brain to the right hemisphere of the brain. This is what Einstein did, and what all of us do when we pay attention to our dreams, when we delve into the psychic parts of our brain, and when we seek new visionary experiences. And we now have some very good laboratory confirmation of the difference between the left and right hemispheres of our brain. And this is crucial if we're going to get to the new Renaissance. All of our brains are divided into a left and right hemisphere in the frontal cortex of our brains. And it turns out that all animals have a division, left and right hemisphere. Most of my information, because listeners have a right to say, where are you getting this information? Most of it comes from a brilliant contemporary visionary named Ian McGilchrist, who's written two brilliant books that have been a big influence on me. I had the opportunity to interview Ian for an hour and a half. And what he has shown, and he has over 800 footnotes to back up what he's saying, the left hemisphere of our brain sees the world differently than the right hemisphere. Both are important, but we've been emphasizing the left hemisphere. So let's talk about that. The left hemisphere of our brain is the part of our brain that sees the world as a mechanism that can be best understood by breaking it down into individual parts, like a watch. That's what helped Isaac Newton discover the laws of cause and effect, which revolutionized science. But Einstein came along, and the quantum scientists came along to show that while Newton was not wrong, he was limited. That at the depth of nature, it's not mechanistic, it's not sequential. It's an integrated web. And it's the right hemisphere of our brain that understands that and can see that, because the right hemisphere of our brain, which is physically larger than the left and is wired in a much more intricate way than the left, we know this through MRI and EEG technologies and laboratory experiments. The right hemisphere of our brain is intuitive. It's not rational. It's not logical. There's a place for rationality and logic in the left hemisphere. But what we understand as seekers is that's not giving us a big enough picture of where we are and where we need to go. And so by shifting to the right hemisphere of our brain, that's what artists do. That's what poets do. That's what musicians do. And that's what creative thinkers in all professions do. They're not satisfied with what logic and rationality can tell us. They understand that we have a part of our brain that can intuit deeper and more expansive levels of what reality has to offer us. Okay, so the first section of my book details how we can shift from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere of our brain through looking at our dreams more carefully and understanding their language, by sharpening our intuitive skills, our psychic skills, etc. Section number 2 is the shift from the printed page to the digital screen. Now, right. I know a lot of people, including I'm sure a lot of your listeners, are somewhat frustrated by the digital screen. It's peculiar, it's fast, there's a lot of noise out there. Kids are getting addicted to social media, etc. But as I show through the great visionary Marshall McLuhan, who was the most sought after visionary of the 1960s and 70s, he showed us that all new media, this was true for television, radio, the printing press, as well as computers, forces us to rewire our brains more intricately to take in information in new and more interesting ways. And that takes time. A lot of your listeners who have kids and grandkids know that they connect to the digital screen much more easily than we do. Their brains are more malleable and wired. But what I show in this section, and I'll give an example, is that when we learn, if it wasn't for the digital screen, Roberta, you and I wouldn't be talking right now.
It's true. And it's so easy to use.
The
It really
digital screen,
is. It's much easier than reading a book. There's
it,
no way
yes,
around
it is the most collaborative medium ever invented. And what evolution shows us very clearly is that what makes human beings the most intelligent and powerful entities on this planet, it's not our physical strength. Elephants, tigers are much stronger than we are. And now it's not even our ability to be logical and rational, because computers are already better than that than we are. We are being called upon to go deeper into the human brain and learn how to collaborate with each other in new and innovative ways. And the digital screen and the World Wide Web is gives us the greatest opportunity in evolution to do this work. In order to do it, we have to get underneath all the noise of the digital screen, all the noise of the 24/7 news cycle. But here's my proposal. Any of your listeners who's ever done any form of contemplation or meditation, right? Sitting quietly. Anyone who's done any deep spiritual work knows what I'm about to say. The first thing we encounter when we try to contemplate, meditate, go deeper is the chattering monkey mind, the part of our brain that's constantly talking at us about things we didn't get done and things we need to do and things we should be fearful about. And anyone who becomes a good meditator or contemplative thinker learns how to get underneath the noise of his or her own noisy, chattering mind to the deeper levels, which I know you've experienced and your listeners have experienced, where we get a much deeper sense of reality. So here's my question. If every time we as individuals have to go underneath the chattering mind of our own, why would we think when we got on the digital screen, when 5.5 billion of us are connected, why do we think that would be suddenly quiet, perfectly organized, and easy to navigate? No, we have to get underneath the noise, because if you take the time, and I give a lot of examples in my book, The Quantum and the Dream, brilliant, as we are speaking here, Roberta, brilliant, the most brilliant visionary minds on the planet are collaborating with each other. They're doing it through email, through blogs, through websites, through podcasts like you and I are conversing on right now. This is all going on, but it's underneath the 24/7 news cycle that the media constantly reports on. And when you get into that level and see things that are going on, like at the MIT Media Lab, where philosophers, artists, and scientists are collaborating to find ways to use the World Wide Web in an even more collaborative way, you start to get a little more optimistic about where we might be headed. So that's the second section. The third section is the shift from the age of information to the age of recognition. So, up until the digital age, we humans had a right to think that the reason we're so smart and we're so powerful is because of our ability to gather information and analyze it. But guess what? Computers are already better at that than we are.
Yeah, right.
A lot of people are very concerned legitimately that as AI, computer intelligence, gets more and more intelligent, it's going to replace us. I don't think that's going to happen. It's possible. But if we stick with the materialist paradigm, if we stick with the left hemisphere of our brain, which our educational system still puts more value on, we will get replaced, because we're being called upon to shift to the deeper parts of our minds and our hearts, to become more empathic and more collaborative, right. Underneath all the noise and anxiety out there. And so what am I calling the age of recognition? You and I and everyone listening to us and everyone on this planet are all part of nature's intelligence. We were born out of nature's intelligence. We're not apart from it. Our culture teaches us that we are separate from nature and we can pull from her all we want for our personal comfort. How's that working out with global warming and climate change, which is accelerating? The recognition is, and this comes from a brilliant scientist whose nickname was the Angry Earth Mother. Her name was Lynn Margulis. She should be better well known, and I talk about her in my book.
Oh my goodness.
Do you know of her?
No, but I love that title.
Oh, she earned it because when she was a teenager, she married the brilliant astronomer Carl Sagan. And the son she had, Dorian, she ended up collaborating with the rest of her life. She divorced Carl, but she said when she was getting her PhD in biology in the 60s, which was a male-dominated, realm, she said, I love men, but I'm not going to give in to them. I'm getting my PhD, and I'm going to put forth my thesis. And her thesis, which was ridiculed at the time, has been proven to be true. And her thesis is brilliant. She proved that microbes, those tiny little viruses and bacteria that make up most of who we are and most of what the earth is, right? Over millions of years, they developed an ability to collaborate more effectively. Now, at the surface level, bacteria and viruses and microbes are just like the human jungle. There's lots of competition. There's lots of predators eating others. There's lots of fights to the death. There's lots of territorial wars going on at the microbial level. But Lynn Margulis had an instinct, and she was able to prove that underneath all of that eat or be eaten, the zero-sum game of in order for one person to win, another person has to lose, which still dominates our culture. She discovered that microbes figured out over millions of years how to collaborate more effectively. And they are the ones, these microbes that don't have any individual brains, through a process we now understand called self-organization, figured out photosynthesis, which is the most powerful and important technology that has ever existed on this planet. It is through photosynthesis that microbes and plants take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. We take the oxygen, give off carbon dioxide. It's a perfect symbiotic relationship. So Lynn Margulis proved that nature's intelligence is an evolution. She said Darwin wasn't wrong, but he was limited in his vision of natural selection. that evolution is constantly pulling all of us to be able to collaborate in new and more complex ways. That's evolution's message to us.
Have you ever read The Secret Life of Plants?
It's brilliant.
Yes. There's another book, more recent, which is effectively about forests. Have you read that too?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because in my book, I found something that blew my mind. Isn't it fun when your mind gets blown?
Oh, yes.
Something new.
But I love the fact that it happens so often.
Well, that's the age we're in. So I'm forgetting his name. Shame on me, but he's in my book. He was a German forester.
Yes, yes. I just wrote a blog post about him and a few other things about plants. Yes. Yes.
That's synchronicity. Okay.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Well, so what he discovered, loving forests and trees, is that trees communicate at a very sophisticated level.
Yes. Take care of
their roots.
Babies. Take care of the living stumps that after the trees are cut down. Oh my goodness. Yes.
And I had a big laugh because, I moved up to Woodstock, New York from New York City to help start Radio Woodstock, which I still do a talk show on. Woodstock's famous for a festival and is still famous as an art and music center, right? So Woodstock has a certain meaning. Well, this forester, when he realized, my God, these trees can talk to each other and that they're connected, right? He calls it the Wood Wide Web instead of the World
I
Wide
know.
Web. Okay, the Wood Wide Web. So the World Wide Web that we have a right to brag about because we humans created it, that you and I are talking on right now,
Right.
we picked up. The reason there's a World Wide Web is because intuitively, human beings picked up on the Wood Wide Web that's been going on for millions of years before we ever showed up on this planet. And so, if we do it right, and I'm predicting we will, kicking and screaming, and it's going to take a lot of chaos and a lot of disruption before we see it. Okay. But that's how nature works. Nature doesn't work by slowly, step by step, improving things. No, it's a process that's called punctuated equilibrium.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
What that means is that evolution will be pretty much sort of seem like it's going at a pretty level way for a long, and then all of a sudden there's this leap. But here's the trick: the leap doesn't happen without a lot of disruption. Okay, and so what looks like a very dark period is actually the predecessor, if we work it right, to a huge evolutionary leap in consciousness. So I am proposing that the chaos that's going on in the world, it was going on before the recent election, it's been accelerating. Why? Two major reasons: global warming and climate change, which is ferocious. Just ask the people in North Carolina who are still trying to pick up after a hurricane was supposed to be a force 1 and turned into a force 4, Helene. Ask the people in Barcelona, Spain, who are still picking themselves out of the mud of a huge flood, unprecedented flood. This is the new normal because of our greed taking so much from nature using fossil fuels. Nature is not angry with us. She's doing what she does. She's reacting to what we've been doing. And just like there's a Wood Wide Web, before we ever showed up, nature created forest fires. Why? To clear out the dead wood so new growth could emerge.
Right.
I'm proposing, and I know you are, Roberta, that the dead wood, we don't want to see dead people. Okay. Unfortunately, climate change is going to harm a lot of people. The dead wood we're talking about on the spiritual plane is the deadwood of the materialist paradigm, the deadwood that in order to live a good life, we need more and more and more stuff. The paradigm that says we are apart from nature and we're here to take from her what we need for our personal comforts. It's not going to work. And I am encouraged by young people who don't want big luxury homes. They want nice homes, but they don't have to be huge. They want to drive nice cars. They don't have to be the most expensive status-seeking car. There's trends like the tiny home trend. You have to look a little more deeply to find these, but they are happening. And they need to happen because we need to recognize we are getting the information we need. Computers get us more information than we know what to do with. Our job is to see beyond the materialist paradigm and to learn how to be empathic towards each other, collaborate with each other in small groups, and that will percolate. Just as microbes figured out photosynthesis and how to collaborate, we're going to figure out new and more fundamentally powerful ways to collaborate and merge our brains together by doing things like we're doing here, having conversations that call on us to stretch our minds out and open up to the right hemisphere of our brain, which is capable of amazing, visionary, new ideas and new ways of seeing reality.
I think that it's true that people are looking for better and better ways to do more and more with less and less. People are becoming more and more respectful. And the more they learn about things like the fact that all plants are conscious
Mm-hmm.
and actually very conscious. It's not just a little bit conscious. Plants are so conscious that, I mean, for example, I have trouble now eating an uncooked plant. I no longer eat leafy salads. I just can't do it anymore. I can eat fruits and tomatoes and things, but I can't eat a leafy salad anymore because I think of it as living things. It would be like eating a I don't know, a parrot. I just can't do it. And more and more people are doing things like consciously wanting to give charities where they're aware of the money, where the money's going and how it's actually helping, as opposed to randomly writing a check. And that kind of and it's just starting. I just see it starting, but that kind of sensitivity to making one people out of humanity really makes a difference. And I think it starts to arise from our being aware of how all living creatures are part of one. We're all part of one. It's not just people are not different inherently from the rest of reality in some profound ways. It's hard for me even to articulate this, but things are really starting to shift in the way that you're talking about, and I can see it happening now.
Well, I was very taken by not only what you said, but this gets to left and right hemisphere. It is very difficult to find words for the type of things you were talking about. You did, but anyone watching you, right, will have no doubt about what your feeling is about this. Because as humans, we don't only analyze the words that we say, but how the words are being presented and our body language and our tone of voice. Those are things that computers can't do. Computers are magnificent. They're going to get more and more intelligent, but they are not sentient. How come I was never taught that word? Sentient means the ability to feel emotion. And that's what I picked up from you is your way of emotionally resonating with something more powerful than we were taught. And so I thank you for that. If I may, I'll give you one of the most memorable aha moments or that kind of freaked me out when I was 6 years old and then as an adult dealt with, having to do with plants. And when I was 6 years old and was first allowed to walk on my own to my friend in the neighborhood to go play ball, right, in his backyard, I'm walking along the sidewalk and I stop because I was stunned by something I caught attention to. A fragile, thin, little blade of grass had grown through the cement sidewalk. And my 6-year-old brain went, how could a fragile blade of grass grow through hard cement? How did it do that? As I was reflecting on this, writing my book, thanks to the World Wide Web, I put into my search engine, how does a blade of grass grow through cement? And I got an explanation in 5 seconds. Without the World Wide Web, I would have had to go to a library, and I still love going to libraries, and it would have taken me maybe hours and hours to find that out. And maybe that library didn't have the book I needed, so I would have had to go to another library. I found it in 5 seconds that, in fact, that blade of grass didn't plow through the cement. It found a microscopic aperture that it was able to move through. Now, why? But where did that blade of grass find the drive and impetus to get through that microscopic hole in the cement? It was its need for sunlight.
Right.
It was born with an inherent drive to seek out sunlight so that it create photosynthesis, which it got from microbes millions of years ago through collaborative efforts That's how that blade of grass got through the cement. And nature is so much. So I created a formula for my book, and I can describe it. It's more impactful visually. But imagine the initials NI, which stand for nature's intelligence, in a large font. And then a parentheses, and in a smaller font, HI over AI, close the parenthesis, equals New Renaissance. The HI stands for human intelligence. AI stands for computer intelligence. So what I am proposing is that if, and I think we will, if we can apply our human intelligence and collaborate with computer intelligence, which means we have to go to the right hemisphere, the parts that the computers can't do, right? The more imaginative, the more visionary, the more empathic, the more heartfelt. If we can combine our intelligence with computers' intelligence properly and understand that that's happening within nature's intelligence, which is much more powerful than either our intelligence or computer intelligence, that's how we get to a new renaissance. Because everything we've learned through nature's intelligence. Why do we build dams? These magnificent, huge dams, which create enough water supply so we can live comfortably in towns, villages, and cities. Where did we learn to do that? By watching beavers. Where did we learn to collaborate? Well, guess what? And I go through this in the third section of my book. A bee colony, right, has a better track record of finding a new place to build a hive when the old hive is no longer providing what it needs, right? It's a very complex. In order for a bee colony to find a new hive successfully, it has to find an area that has enough water, enough plants that pollinate, that isn't so cold that it'll freeze everything in the winter, that isn't too hot that it'll fry everything in the summer. How does the colony do that? They do it by certain of the bees are programmed to go out as scouts, and they come back and they do a waggle dance. You can see this on YouTube.
Yes.
And they communicate to each other, and they figure out the best place to put the new hive. And guess what? Entomologists who study insects have shown that a bee colony has a better success rate at the project of finding a new hive than the best human corporations have of starting their new projects. We learn from nature, and we've been too busy taking from her. And that's the shift in consciousness that's going to get us to a new renaissance.
Well, all I know is we have so much to learn from plants, even down to the cellular level of plants. It is so extraordinary. And I can't begin to tell you what a difference it's made in my life to know that stuff. One of the most important books in my life, and I first read it in 1973, was The Secret Life of Plants. I hate to tell you this, my dear, but we've come to the end of our time. In fact, we've gone way over time. So we have to do this again, because there's so much more I want to talk to you about than we have time to do today. But
I would love to come back.
What would you like people to take away from what we said today?
Well, first of all, I would appreciate the chance to hope that your listeners will check out my book. It's called The Quantum and the Dream. The subtitle
I will definitely mention it again. Yes, and it will be mentioned again in the footnote, and also your website will be mentioned in the footnote.
Sure. My website is douglasgrunther.com, and it's a landing page for the book. Roberta, it took me 50 years to write this. Not that I was working on it for 50 years, but some of the insights come from things I first started thinking about 50 years ago.
That's clear.
And I'm pleased that Publishers Weekly gave it a rave review. I appreciate that on Amazon it gets 5 stars. I'm very thrilled by that. I wasn't expecting it. It's available on Amazon. It can be ordered at any bookstore, independent or large bookstore. Um, and if people have questions or comments on my website, you can email me. I so much appreciate your giving me the chance to talk about this, and I loved hearing about your way of bringing about this new renaissance and your deep feeling for plants and nature's intelligence. It's heartwarming, and it gives us all some confidence that we can do this.
I can't begin to tell you how important it is that there are, let me just tell you, a great many people who are working on it, each in a very different way. So this is an each one teach one situation. And as we go about our teaching, we are spreading the good word.
And
This is happening.
if I could leave you with this, because I try to think about how I wanted to end my book, and I ended it with one of my all-time favorite quotes from the brilliant anthropologist Margaret Mead, who said, "Never think that a small group of committed citizens can change the world, because in fact, it's the only thing that ever has."
Yes, I love that quote. Oh, yes, and I love her too. Well, big hug, my dear, and I will have you back as soon as as soon as I can find some space. There's so many people I love who do this work, and I this every time I get to speak to someone who, like you, has done so much, it feels like there's so much wealth in the world, and the wealth is the minds of people like you. So big hug, my darling.
And thank you for your wonderful work and for your great podcast. I appreciate it.
Big hug. And everyone, my beloved friends, I'm so sorry to say we've come to the end of our time together. And you stay put, dear, because I want to talk to you afterwards.
I'm right here.
This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could be with us today for this very special, special conversation. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you get what that means and all its implications, it's never going to change anything right now. Instead, it changes everything and forever in your life because you really are eternal. Next week, our guest will be another first-time guest for us, but someone who's been working on a lot of things for a very long time. His name is Reagan Forston. He's one of the 200 plus certified therapists from the Newton Institute who are continuing the research of Michael Newton, who passed away in 2016. Over 50 years ago, Michael discovered that each one who passes away is going to live on forever. It has built in what he called the God switch. I don't always agree with everything Michael wrote about because I've gone at my research from a different perspective. And I won't agree with all of the, frankly, language that Reagan uses next week, but I think the work that they do there is so important that I asked him to come to talk with us about it. In a deeply relaxed state, people can easily access what they call the God switch and can transcend their physical bodies and spend hours exploring the greater reality. And Reagan's book is called 3 Hours, 33 Minutes in Heaven. Well, they really are in the greater reality, not in the technical afterlife. He talks about his experience in that book, and it's fascinating. So please be sure to join us next week. Today we've been talking with Douglas Grunther, and wow, wow, hasn't this been a great conversation? His book is called The Quantum and the Dream, Visionary Consciousness, AI in the New Renaissance. I think his book is fantastic. I urge you to read it. And as you can see, he's a profound spiritual thinker with very much to contribute to what's happening right now in this world. So, as I say, go ahead, read it, and look forward, please, to the next time he's here to join us. And as you know, our great friend Craig Hogan is the president and guru of Seek Reality Online, which is your one-stop resource for all things afterlife. You are going to live forever, whether you like it or not. You
Hmm.
never began, you never will end. So go to seekreality.com, start learning what comes next so that you can really enjoy it from the minute you get there. And as you know, teachingsbyjesus.com is your best resource for all the beautiful divine truths that are brought to us in perfect love by the greatest teacher of them all, Master Jesus. Now it really is his turn because the Christianity that he didn't bring us was instead created by the Roman Emperor Constantine and not by Jesus. As that religion finally dies, the genuine teachings of Jesus can at last truly come alive for us all. We don't have any time left because we ran over so much because I was having some sorry so much fun. So we really do have to sign off now. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy, make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing for certain that you are a powerful, eternal being in you, most of all in this whole, not just the universe, but all of the greater reality too. You are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.